Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. In today's podcast, we'll talk about the Eastern Conference Finals rematch between the Bucks and the Raptors. We'll talk about the troubles of Philly continuing and Zion's first game against LeBron and the Lakers. We'll talk about the Jazz and the Grizzlies starting to slip up a bit in the competitive Western Conference, and similarly looking at the Heat and the Pacers in the East. Then we'll end the show with some predictions on the biggest games coming up over the next few days. Now, the Eastern Conference Finals rematch. If you don't remember, it's the Bucks and the Raptors in this big Eastern Conference matchup, 1 and 2 in the East right now, with the Raptors behind the Bucks by 8 games. So this is a really big opportunity for them to try and cut the deficit a bit, start to gain some ground, and it's a perfect time for them to do it. They're red hot right now. They were winning 17 of the last 18 games, went on a crazy 15-game winning streak, the longest win streak of their franchise history. But then again, they're going up against the Milwaukee Bucks, who only lost 8 games this year and have been extremely, extremely consistent and have, been almost unbeatable this year. And so this could very easily become the Eastern Conference Finals again. So it raises the question: are the Raptors best suited to win the East? And it's a question I've posed a bit from podcast to podcast, just because every day it seems like a new team looks like they can maybe go up against the Bucks, and then when you see it, you're just not sure anymore. Also, side note: someone on the broadcast of this game actually suggested that Pascal Siakam could be the most improved player again, and it kind of got me thinking, like, why didn't I think of that? Because that's so true. Last year he won the Most Improved Player award, but he was still in a second-tier, third-tier option role. And now with the absence of Kawhi Leonard, he's become a superstar out of nowhere. So he has made 2 big jumps in 2 years. So he easily could be one of the finalists for Most Improved this year, but probably won't be. Probably will be overlooked just because of the fact that he's already won that award, and the fact that, actually, I don't even know. I feel like he really should be considered for this award. But that was just a side note. Going back to the game, Drake, obviously a big artist in the world of music, is a huge Toronto Raptors fan. He's usually at most games courtside, harassing fans and just being a nuisance, really. He's also a big troll. He came to this game wearing 2 WWE wrestling belts. And if you don't know the context of this, the Milwaukee Bucks typically take the mascot of the opposing team and play wrestle with them before the game. Sometimes it's Brooke Lopez, sometimes it's Robin Lopez. But every player on the team do WWE-type moves to kind of loosen up, just have some fun for the game, with Giannis usually landing the final blow. And it's kind of symbolic of how the way they play on the court as well. Obviously not wrestling on the court, but they do have Giannis be the guy that, gives that final blow, and most of the time they do knock out their opponent. They're 50-8 this season. So these two teams, like I said before, they met in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And if you don't remember that, the Bucks won the first 2 games, and it looked like, they're going to go on to win the whole thing and go to the finals, just because of how confident they looked, how competitive they looked, and how consistent they had been all season long. Very similarly to how they've been this year so far. But then, out of nowhere, Kawhi Leonard completely took over the series, shut down Giannis Antetokounmpo, and his second man in Middleton kind of just froze, kind of disappeared in this playoff series. And then they lost 4 straight to have Raptors take the series and end up going to the finals and then winning the finals against the Golden State Warriors. So a very salty moment for the Bucks. Obviously something that was on the minds of the players. Giannis even said, "You always remember the last time you played here, the feelings you had. It definitely was on my mind," end quote. Which I thought was interesting because, sometimes people try to take one game at a time. They try and live in the moment, but since you were that close to getting your goal of going to an NBA Finals and losing in the fashion that they did 4 straight games, I guess it should kind of hold a little bit of weight over their heads and something they wanted to take into this game and, prove to everyone that they can beat this team consistently. And it got me thinking as well that with the Raptors now without Kawhi Leonard, with LeBron no longer the king in the East, he's moved over to the West, with no KD in the East right now, this is the perfect time for the Milwaukee Bucks to take the East and go to the finals. They have no major obstacle. LeBron James is not there anymore. KD is injured right now. And no more Kawhi Leonard because he left too. So either way, this is a really big test for the Bucks because this Toronto Raptors team, who have been playing extremely well as of late, could easily be their matchup in the Eastern Conference Finals. So they took the game as such. They played it as such. Most players saying that they had a playoff atmosphere to it, which makes sense. Even if it is just regular season, doesn't matter. The Raptors in this one wouldn't have Gasol, wouldn't have Powell, and wouldn't have McCaw. So they were missing a little bit of personnel. They've had injury issues this season so far. Whereas the Bucks were coming off an overtime win against Washington, so maybe they were going to be a little bit tired on a back-to-back, having gone to overtime in their last meeting. The last game between these two teams was in Milwaukee in November 2nd, where the Bucks won 115-105. So looking to build on that performance, the game started out real ugly. If you're watching it live, no team scored for the first 2-3 minutes, and no one could take the lid off the basket. It just didn't look like either team wanted to score the first basket. Then eventually they found their way, and it was Toronto who was up 27-25 heading to the second. Early on in the second, Raptors caught a groove and extended their lead to the biggest of the game, 51-39. But with less than 3 minutes to go in that second quarter, the Bucks, who had struggled thus far shooting the ball, found the right rhythm to go on an 11-1 run, which made them down only 2 at halftime, with the score being 52-50. That momentum heading into the third is huge. You were down the biggest lead of the game so far, 51-39, and you turn things around, switch the momentum like that to head into halftime locker. So your locker room talk changes exponentially. You're looking to go into that locker room and saying, "We're not playing well right now. We're down however many. We need to fight back. We need to do this better. We're doing all these things wrong." Whereas instead, they go on this run, get down by only 2 and say, "Keep doing what you're doing. Use that momentum and keep pushing because you're going to continue that." And that's exactly what happened. And momentum helped big time in the third quarter. The Bucks continued it. They outscored the Raptors 34-19 in the third quarter alone. And the start of the fourth saw the Bucks up 84-71. So that's a quick turnaround. And it all starts with that push they made with 3 minutes left in the second quarter. The Raptors responded pretty well, came out blazing starting the fourth quarter on a 7-0 run. The Bucks kind of righted the ship for a while, with the Raptors still trying to chip away at the lead. And with less than 2.5 to go, the score was 101-94. And after VanVleet had missed a three-pointer on one end, Giannis hit a three-pointer that effectively iced the game. And so the final score would be 108-97. The Bucks would take this game, meaning that the season series is at 2-0 for the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks have been extremely consistent. Like I said, they've won 18 of their last 20 games, so they've been virtually indestructible lately. They're 8-0 in the second game of back-to-back games, which is even more impressive because coming off of back-to-back, obviously your legs are going to be tired. You were just focused on one team. Now you got to switch your focus to another team, and you got to do it night after night, and that's tough to do. This was also the 82nd consecutive game where they scored 100 points or more. They did, however, lose their streak of 19 games to score over 110 points, which was the longest of the season in the NBA. The Raptors, they had their first home loss since January 12th. That was a 9-game run that they were on, being undefeated at home. They did set a franchise record 52 3-point attempts. They did shoot the ball pretty well from three-point land, better than the Bucks, but having shot that many times at three-point land probably raises the question, could they have gone into the paint a little more, get better opportunities to score, and maybe this lead wouldn't have been as big as it was at the end of the game. Siakam in this one, he had 22 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Van Vliet only had 14 points. OG Anunoby had 11 points, 5 rebounds, 4 boards. And those were their top scorers, 22, 14, and 11. Kyle Lowry shot very poorly from the field, 2 for 12, and 1 for 7 from downtown. And he had 10 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists. So he was not as effective as he probably would have liked to be. Another player that kind of lost his way a bit was Serge Ibaka. He's been having a crazy tear about 20 games or so now where he's scored over 20 points. But in this game, however, he just couldn't take the lid off the basket. He had 5 points. He went 2 or 15 from the field and 1 for 10 from three-point land. So he struggled mightily, whereas Giannis and the Bucks, they did not. Giannis went off. He scored 19 points, grabbed 19 boards, and had 8 assists. So he was doing literally everything, and not to mention the fact that he also had 3 blocks. So not only is he getting it done on the offensive end, but on the defensive end, he's shutting it down as well. Middleton had one of his better games of the season, 22 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. And so that's where Middleton needs to live, in that 20-point range, where he's grabbing a couple boards as well to help out Giannis. He needs to be consistently that good. Eric Bledsoe, I really like this guy's game. He's just such a big dude, but he's like a little guy, but he's just so tough, plays so hard. And he had 17 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. And then Brook Lopez back in the lineup after missing a game due to some rest. He had 15 points, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, and 5 blocks. So he was a force on the defensive end, which is exactly what you need when typically he's not really going to be the whole offense, although he does hit a couple of threes. I noticed that in the corner as well. So definitely a good stretch 5 for their team. So in a way, Bucks get some sort of redemption in this game. How much really does it matter in the grand scheme of things? It's yet to be seen. But it raises the question again, could this be the Eastern Conference Finals? Could a team knock off the Bucks? I mean, they lost 2 games to the Bucks already, so they'd be down 2-0 in a series, but they've come back from a 2-0 deficit before. What really raises the question for me is if the Bucks end up losing in the Eastern Conference Finals, or even before that, if they fail to make the finals, will Giannis stay a Milwaukee Buck? And I saw Colin Cowherd today talk on his show saying that he's heard rumors that he believes to be true, that if they don't make it to the finals, that he could potentially be leaving. And he could potentially be leaving to the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors who just traded for Andrew Wiggins, whose salary matches up with Giannis, who also has a potential top 3 pick from Minnesota and has a lottery pick as well of their own now that they're in last place in the Western Conference. So they have all the pieces they need to make this blockbuster trade. So selfishly, as a Warriors fan, I'm hoping that this somehow comes to fruition, but I really think that no team can stop the Milwaukee Bucks. They end up going to the finals, and they have a very good chance of winning the whole thing this year. So that probably won't happen, but who's to say for sure? When we return, we take a look at another former Eastern Conference powerhouse. Is that too soon to say? Find out who, coming up next.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC basketball podcast. We just talked about the Milwaukee Bucks taking on the Toronto Raptors, and the Bucks coming out on top. They've won 18 of their last 20 games in this Eastern Conference Finals rematch. The Milwaukee Bucks come on top, and it's a huge win for them because Toronto eliminated them last year in this Eastern Conference Finals matchup, seeing that the Bucks were up 2-0 in the series, and then the Raptors won 4 straight to knock them out, obviously head to the finals, and end up winning the whole thing. So definitely a game that held some importance to Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis even said so himself. He had a monster game, 19 points and 19 boards with 8 assists. So he's crazy, playing extremely well, and the Milwaukee Bucks are just so consistent. I don't think they can be stopped, honestly. And they definitely can't be stopped by this Philadelphia Sixers team, who have had it so rough lately. I mean, when it rains, it truly pours. And that's so true for the Philadelphia Sixers right now. They do have a record of 36-23. That's pretty respectable. Not bad. They're in 5th place right now in the Eastern Conference, but they're 5-5 in their last 10 games. So they haven't been that consistent, haven't been playing that well. A few games ago, they lost Ben Simmons. He had a nerve impingement in his back, and he will be reevaluated in 2 weeks. So with Ben Simmons out of your roster, he's the main person that has the ball in his hands. He's controlling your offense, controlling the pace most of the time. And he's an all-star. So clearly when you lose one of your all-stars, your team is going to falter. It's going to have some issues. And I talked about it last podcast that I don't think that Embiid can do it all by himself. And I still think that's true. I mean, the offense can move differently through Embiid. Obviously, he can be the guy that they throw into the post, and they make runs and back screens off of him. So they can run the offense that way without Benjamin Simmons being their main distributor. They can run it that way. And sometimes he can dominate games by himself, but I don't think they can do it consistently. For example, he could do it against the Atlanta Hawks. He was an absolute monster in that game. He had a career-high 49 points, had 14 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 steals. So maybe he can carry for a bit of the season. He's pretty good. He's an absolute monster. I mean, career-high. I mean, talking about playing against an Atlanta Hawks team that have only won 17 games this year, aren't that good. But even still, this is an NBA caliber team, and Embiid completely treated them like boys. He was a man amongst boys. And in a game without Ben Simmons, he had to be, because the Sixers team is going to fall without him. And so the next matchup against the Cavs, it seemed like it would be another team for Embiid to possibly bully, because the Cavs have been neck and neck with the Atlanta Hawks on who's the worst team in the East this season. The issue was that late in the first quarter, Joel Embiid would leave the game and ruled out for the rest of it with a left shoulder sprain. That is absolutely worst case scenario for the 76ers. He ran into Zizic. He did end up taking the free throws, but he clearly was in pain and he missed both. I mean, this contact that happened kind of underneath the basket didn't look like anything too serious. It really didn't. It was kind of just an awkward exchange. I don't even know how to really describe it. It didn't look like it was that serious, but Embiid was clearly in pain, left the game, did not return. And so it's an issue. With no Embiid, no Simmons, is it time to panic for the 76ers? I definitely think so. The only reason why they don't need to hugely put the panic button on is because the Eastern Conference is so well suited for them to lose a bunch of games that they can still make the playoffs without winning a bunch of games in their next 20 games or so. But for the immediate future, it does look like they're going to be losing a lot of games. I mean, Embiid averages 23.8 points per game and has 12 boards per game. And so when you don't run your offense through Embiid, when you're posting up and running off of him, and you don't have Benjamin Simmons running the offense, drawing up plays or what have you, it's an issue. I mean, that's two big all-stars that have just left your starting lineup. Look at the Golden State Warriors. They lost Klay Thompson. They lost Stephen Curry most of the year. They're the worst team in the West right now. They've won 12 games, lost 46. And so two all-stars obviously are a huge blow, because who's going to fill the void for them on this Sixers team? And even with Embiid on the court, the majority of the first quarter in this game, he managed only 3 points in 8 minutes, and the Sixers were outscored 28-17 in this game. The Sixers' offense without Simmons just doesn't move as quickly, doesn't move as fluidly, and Al Horford even said this himself after the game, saying that once Simmons is out, once Embiid's out, it's kind of tough to try and go out there and just figure it out, because now you don't really know how you're going to be running your offense, who you're going to be going through, who's your main guy. And so moving on in this game, they struggled mightily. They were able to keep pace with the Cavs through halftime, though, through the second quarter, each team scoring 27 points in the second. And then at one point in the third quarter, the Cavaliers were up 70-50 because, obviously, the lack of offense. But little by little, the Sixers fought back. They got as close as 85-80 in the fourth quarter, but that's where the comeback would end. They never had the lead in this game against the Cavaliers. And they lost the game 108-94 against the Cavs. The Cavs have won 17 games this season, lost 41. And so if this is the beginning of what the 76ers are going to be going through, it's going to be a tough road for them. Obviously, they're going to have to find more time, more practice time, more film sessions, what have you, and more preparation to play without Ben Simmons, to play without Joel Embiid. But you only have a brief window to try and figure it out. Did I mention that in this game against the Cavaliers, Andre Drummond didn't even play? He has a strained left calf. So if he didn't play, you're going up against a Cavs team that's led by Colin Sexton, Kevin Love kind of off to the side, not really caring as much this season, and you're losing because you don't have your two All-Stars. It's going to be a tough road for them. Tough road for them, and especially since they're 9-21 on the road. That is one of the worst road records in the NBA, if not the worst. And it's crazy because they're 27-2 at home, so they clearly can only play at home. So they need to figure that out, especially if they want to go deep in the playoffs. They need to be able to win on the road. But in this one, Shake Milton, who started for Ben Simmons, actually had a pretty decent game. He had 20 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. So that's definitely a bright spot for them to try and move forward and try and play through someone else. I don't know if he can do that consistently. Korkmaz has been a decent boost off the bench. He had 14 points. Alec Burks as well, definitely a welcome addition to start scoring more. He had 13 points. He played in a pretty good role for the Golden State Warriors when their All-Stars were out for a while. So maybe now that Ben Simmons and Embiid are out, he'll get more playing time, get more responsibility, and he'll start playing better. Tobias Harris, definitely a player that needs to step up. He's been underwhelming, underperforming pretty much all season long. He had 11 points, 4 rebounds with 3 steals, so good on him for the 3 steals, but 11 points from Tobias Harris when Embiid goes down and you don't have Ben Simmons already. He needs to step up. He needs to be the guy with the ball in his hands, taking over the game. Al Horford as well, his numbers will probably go up now that Embiid's out. He'll be the main guy underneath the basket. He had 10 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists with 3 steals. And then Josh Richardson, he's recently come back from injury, so he's not the same as he was before. He was 4 for 13 in this game from the field, had 9 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists with 2 steals and 2 blocks. So he did play pretty well all around. He just couldn't find the bucket. He couldn't find his scoring touch. So little by little, he'll try and get that back. And honestly, just seeing any star players go down, it sucks to see. It really does. I mean, not having Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid play for who knows how long. I mean, Simmons is getting reevaluated in 2 weeks. doesn't mean he's necessarily back in 2 weeks. And then Embiid's straining a left shoulder. I mean, Kyrie Irving strained his left shoulder a while ago, right? And he's out for the whole season. So I really hope that's not the worst case scenario for the Sixers. But as right now, in this immediate future, it's going to be tough for them to try and win any games. And similarly, you can look at the Memphis Grizzlies as too, as the same kind of thing happening. They just lost Jaren Jackson Jr., and now they're on a 4-game losing streak, and they got destroyed by the Rockets, 140 to 112. Without Jaren Jackson Jr., it's all on John Morant and Dylan Brooks, Valanciunas. They still have a decent squad, but that 1-2 punch from Morant and Jaren Jackson isn't present. So it's very tough, especially against the Houston Rockets team, who took back the series against them 2-1. And the small ball works for the Houston Rockets too. So for them, they've won 5 of their 6 games using the small ball lineup, only being beaten by that crazy buzzer beater by Bogdanovich. And not to mention the fact that Russell Westbrook has been crazy as of late. He's shot 50% or better in all 6 games they've played as in the small ball lineup, which is the longest of his career. During the small ball lineup, he has had 34 points on 56.9% shooting. And in the last 25 games, he averaged 31.8 points, 7.8 rebounds, 7.1 assists, shooting the ball 50.2% from the field. So Russ Westbrook's been very efficient and very impactful for the Houston Rockets team. But on the flip side, it's just disappointing for teams like the Grizzlies and the Sixers, who are making the push to make it to that next level, get to the playoffs, get to the finals potentially for the Sixers, and then losing their 2-star players at a time where they should be hitting their stride going into the playoffs is tough to swallow for sure. In other Western Conference news, the King and the new star on the block faced off for the first time all year. Find out how it went coming up next.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how injuries have put a big damper on the Philadelphia 76ers' chances to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, even possibly the Finals this year. Ben Simmons went down with a back injury, will be reevaluated in 2 weeks. And now Embiid, after coming off a career-high 49 points, he now will be sitting with a sprained shoulder. So when it rains, it pours for the Philadelphia 76ers. With these 2 All-Stars out for the Sixers, I see them dropping for sure at least to 6th place. I think they have a nice little cushion because the Nets and the Magic are low enough to where they can lose a few games and still be in that 6th seed. But for the Sixers, who play so poorly on the road, 9-21 on the road, they would much rather be in a situation where they have home court advantage. So this is a terrible situation for them, terrible timing. And it's not looking good for them. It really isn't. And then moving forward, we're talking about the Western Conference now. LeBron James and the Lakers going up against Zion and the Pelicans, who are up and coming. And just a little background information on why this game holds so much weight. First of all, the Pelicans traded AD for Zoe. That's Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, and Brandon Ingram. So this matchup, at least for this year, has some added spice to it. Not to mention the fact that rookie sensation Zion Williamson did not play in the games against the Lakers, their 2 previous matchups, due to injury. So now, in his 13th game, he's going up against the King, and he's going to take it to him. But the man's still sitting on the throne, like I said, at 35 years old, and is in his 17th season. So he's definitely going to come into this game with something to prove. All the headlines talking about Zion against the King, but he's going to make sure to steal those headlines and say, wait, I'm still here. He's got next, but I'm still here. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But Zion Williamson, definitely one of the best talents, young talents in the NBA. I saw a tweet the other day of the top 5 players 21 and under, according to Sean Farnham, who is an ESPN broadcast analyst for basketball games. He gave his top 5 players 21 and under. At number 1 was Luka Doncic. Number 2 was Zion. 3, John Morant. 4, Jason Tatum. 5, Trae Young. I think this is crazy. Absolutely crazy. Disrespect to Tatum and Trae Young. I get it. Zion is a huge, huge talent. Extremely athletic. And extremely good already in only 13 games. But Jason Tatum has made that jump to superstardom. Trae Young has made that jump to superstardom. Those players are definitely above Zion and John Morant. Eventually, Zion will get up there. John Morant, easily 5 on this list. No doubt about that. I just wanted to add that little side note because I thought it was crazy that they already have Zion so highly regarded, even though he's only played 13 games. Yes, he's been phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. But Jason Tatum's been doing it. This is his 3rd year in the NBA. And Trae Young is in his 2nd year in the NBA, and he's playing out of his mind too. I mean, that's the only reason why the Hawks are even remotely exciting to watch, really. But either way, this game between the Lakers and Pelicans will be the first game after the memorial service held for Kobe Bryant on the 24th, 2/24. Made perfect sense. And I just want to share a couple thoughts. Vanessa Bryant, the wife of Kobe Bryant, is an exceptional woman, honestly. The amount that she talked and still had so much poise, so much confidence kind of in what she was saying in front of all of those people was honestly breathtaking. I mean, to have that kind of strength and that courage to talk in front of all those people after you had just suffered such tragedy just speaks to her greatness, and I'm sure Kobe would be extremely proud. Also, just the fact that this memorial service happened, I don't think I've ever seen an event where there have been so many basketball icons in one place. I mean, old, new, present. I mean, it's absolutely insane how many great NBA stars from over the years were in one location. I don't know if that's ever happened before, not even at a Hall of Fame induction ceremony. This was a tremendous occasion under really bad circumstances. One of those bright young stars that were in attendance was Sabrina Ionescu. I hope I said that right. She's the first college player, men or women's, to record 2,000 points, have 1,000 rebounds, and 1,000 assists. She did it that same day in the memorial. She had a great speech. She was there at the memorial, had a great speech talking about Kobe and what he meant to her, and talking about Gianna and what she would have meant to WNBA. And then she flew to her game against Stanford. From LA to Stanford, flew there, and made this happen on 2/24. She's also had 26 total triple-doubles, which is 24 plus 2, 24 being Kobe Bryant's last number, and 2 being Gianna's number as a basketball player. And she's at 8 total triple-doubles this season so far. She tweeted saying, "Your presence is felt, just like we talked about. I hear you. Thank you, KB." Kobe Bryant, of course. And I just thought that was such a cool thing. I mean, you can't write stories better than that. There are also great, funny moments as well from Shaq, who said that there was a quote one time between the two of them where he said, "There's no I in team." And Kobe responded saying, "Yeah, but there's an M-E in that mother effer," which I thought is just so Kobe because that's hilarious. And then MJ as well, making fun of himself, saying that Kobe's got him up here, and he's going to be having to look at MJ crying face emojis or memes for the next however many years. because obviously there's a big meme surrounding MJ of him crying. So him crying again at the memorial service, he poked some fun at that. And I just thought it was really great that, some people shared some funny moments, because I feel like laughter is a great way to heal such tragedy. There was a lot of question to whether or not LeBron James was there. He neither confirmed nor denied it when asked about it, but some people believe that he was incognito. And I feel like he did this probably just so that he wouldn't steal any attention away from what that event truly was supposed to be about, and that was about Kobe Bryant. He didn't want the cameras on him. He didn't want to speak. He wanted it to be about everyone else. He didn't want it to be about him at all. So I think that's the best way he could have handled it, and it wasn't really that important, really. And so he returned from all of that, obviously, in this game against the New Orleans Pelicans, getting back on track. The Lakers shot the ball extremely poorly in the first quarter, but somehow were able to outscore the Pelicans 30-26, despite Ingram having 12 points in that quarter alone. And then in the second, it was a very similar story. The Pelicans shot better from the field again, and yet the Lakers outscored them again in this time 34-32, even though Zion this time scored 13 points. So the Lakers took a 64-58 lead in the halftime, and then after trailing by 14 at one point, the Pelicans started making their push in the third quarter for a comeback, and Ingram scored another 10 points to help the Pelicans cut the deficit to 2 at the end of the third. LeBron James, in the third quarter, had 16 of the team's 24 points to really keep the Lakers afloat, obviously, since he was pretty much scoring all of their points. The game could go any direction from here. In the fourth quarter, though, it'd be Caruso giving them that surge of energy off the bench. He had the biggest moment of the game that, in a lot of ways, felt like the pivotal moment for me. He had a huge block on Lonzo Ball that honestly left Lonzo on his back because he blocked him so hard. Then, on an ensuing possession, Caruso stole the ball from Lonzo, went down the court, and got an and-one to fall. So that swing of momentum right there, for me, was the game changer. Caruso in this one had 8 in that quarter. That's more than all the Pelicans, besides Zion, who had 9. But Zion only had 1 field goal in the fourth quarter, most of the points coming from the line, so he didn't really show up in that fourth quarter. Kind of disappointing to see. So the Lakers hold off the Pelicans. In the first matchup with Zion present, 118-109. And Zion, he still played pretty well. He scored 20 points or more for the 9th consecutive game. LeBron James had this to say after the game. He said, quote, "The kid is special. In today's game where it's a track race, it's fast-paced and it's high-tempo, it fits his game perfectly," end quote. So nice little endorsement from the King, obviously. He's speaking facts because Zion is very built for this day and age's NBA. Even though it is a lot of three-point shooting, it is a lot of fast-paced basketball, and he definitely has the speed, the athleticism to keep up with it. And he can't even be a stretch 5 as well at times. He can knock down the 3-ball. Something that I saw on Twitter, which was really interesting to see, said this. It said 23 years ago, a 19-year-old Kobe faced off against a 35-year-old MJ. They both combined for 69 points. Last night, a 19-year-old Zion faced off against a 35-year-old LeBron. They both combined for 69 points. So it's kind of like past meeting the present, which I think is just so eerie that stats like this can happen because it's like history repeats itself. The newcomer playing the oldcomer and having similar results. It's just very interesting to see. But yeah, Zion really is something special. He had 29 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists in this game. Brandon Ingram, though, he's the one that led Pelicans with all points. Had 34 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists with 2 steals. But on the negative side, he had 7 turnovers, so he needs to take care of the ball a little bit better. But Brandon Ingram, have yourself a game. Make a statement to the Los Angeles Lakers. Holiday and Melly both had 11 points, with Holiday having 9 assists as well. And then Lonzo had very Lonzo-esque numbers at 10 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. LeBron James, though, like I said, showing up and showing out. As a reminder to everyone, and a reminder to Zion that it's not his time yet. He's got next up, but LeBron's got it right now. LeBron James becomes the first player in their 17th season to have a 40-point game since Kobe Bryant in 2013. How fitting is that? He had 40 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists for his season high, obviously. He also had 7 turnovers, which is a negative to his game, but 40 points, 17th season, he's 35 years old. Insane. It's his best performance of the year, and it makes sense because it had some added headlines to it with Zion in the matchup. AD had 21 points, 14 rebounds, 3 boards with 6 blocks. Are you kidding me? This guy is a crazy rim protector. He's been playing extremely well on the defensive end. I think he's probably one of the front runners for the Defensive Player of the Year, no doubt about it. Danny Green added 17 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists with 2 steals, and then KCP had 15 points. Markieff Morris, who was making his Laker debut after they acquired him, after Detroit bought him out, and he's mostly going to be a player that's going to be used for their depth in the wings. He's going to be a great defender. He's going to be a great rebounder. Not necessarily a guy you're going to look for on the offensive end, but in this particular game, his first game as a Los Angeles Laker, he had 4 points and 1 block. So not exciting, but he only played 14 minutes, his first action with the team. So I definitely expect his impact to be felt a little bit more as time goes on. LeBron and AD both might miss their next game against the Dubs, but I feel like this is just because they need to take a game off, and it's a perfect one to do so against the Golden State Warriors, who have been struggling all season long. So I don't think this is any serious injuries, but just some rest that they need. LeBron says he has a sore groin, probably from trying to outdo Zion all night. Makes sense. Either way, though, the Pelicans are still on the rise. I fully expect them to make the playoffs, especially since teams like the Grizzlies and even the Jazz are possibly slipping up. Find out more coming up next.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. We just talked about the Los Angeles Lakers' first matchup against Zion Williamson. He played pretty well, had 29 points. That's his 9th consecutive game with 20 points or more. But he got outdone by the King. He wanted to make sure that the league knows that he's still on the throne. He still leads the NBA. He had 40 points for a season high. First player in their 17th season to score 40 points. So a very great showing for the King in this matchup that probably held a little bit of weight to him, seeing it being the first time he plays up against the first overall pick in Zion Williamson. And now looking forward, the Jazz have not been playing up to their standards as of late. They were on a crazy win streak forever ago, but have fallen off that a lot. They're currently in 6th place. They're 36-22, which is still a pretty good record. That's a really good record, actually. I don't know what I'm talking about. They're on a 4-game losing streak, though, so kind of raises some eyebrows. They're also 4-6 in their last 10 games, so they have not been consistent, haven't been on the winning side of things lately. But they're a team that goes through waves. They were on a crazy win streak, like I said, where when they had first acquired Jordan Clarkson, they weren't losing games. He was just that added piece that they needed off the bench. and he's been playing really well, really consistently. Then they lost the game. They went on another 4-game win streak after that, then lost 5 in a row, won 4 in a row, and now they're on a 4-game losing streak again. So where is the consistency for the Utah Jazz? I just want to know. I'm just asking for a friend. They go on crazy roller coasters of different fortunes. So looking at that, not necessarily a huge worry for them, probably. But knowing how inconsistent they are, this is the time where they want to turn things around and keep it going in the right direction, gaining that momentum heading into the playoffs, because it's getting close to that time. During this current losing streak that started with the San Antonio Spurs, they also lost to the Rockets, but they also lost to the Suns, so that's a game they definitely could have won. And then most recently, they lost to the Celtics. So got to give them some benefit of the doubt. There was some tough games they were up against in the Celtics and the Rockets, but they definitely could win games against the Spurs and the Suns. So it raises the question now that they're on a 4-game losing streak, do they need to switch things up? The answer is yes, at least to their coach and to their organization. Initially, the report was that the Jazz are going to be benching Mike Conley and moving Royce O'Neal into the starting lineup. This season, Conley has been extremely disappointing in a move where they're trying to get their point guard that they've been needing for the last few years. They made a move for Mike Conley, and he just hasn't been living up to expectations at all. And honestly, it's looking like the Grizzlies won that trade. But like I said, he's been very disappointing. He's averaged 12.7 points per game this season with the Jazz, which is nowhere near his best. So it would make sense to put him on the bench. But shortly after putting out that they were going to be benching Mike Conley, they changed their mind. The Jazz have now decided to bench Joe Ingles after already telling players they were going to be benching Conley. So Ingles, too, he has been another player that's been very underwhelming this season. In their last game in particular against the Celtics, he had 2 points. He came off the bench and played 26 minutes and shot the ball 3 total times. So he had no impact whatsoever, which makes no sense because this is a guy that can let it fly from three-point land and make it probably 35 to 40% of the time. This game against the Celtics, who have Tatum, who is definitely a superstar, if I haven't mentioned already at this point, you got to give them some benefit of the doubt because of who they're playing against. Another team struggling as of late are the Memphis Grizzlies. They're promising up-and-coming team. They were looking like they're going to solidly hold on to that 8th seed, playing really well. But then, much like we talked about earlier with the 76ers, injuries struck, and now they're back under 500. Their current record right now is at 28-30, so not exactly where they want to be. They're 2.5 up on the Portland Trailblazers, who haven't been playing that well as of late. They're 4-6 in their last 10 in their own right, but they are still making that same push. They're obviously only 2.5 back. Have players like Damian Lillard who will come back soon from injury. That'll give them the added boost that they need. CJ McCollum playing some of his better basketball, had a season high pretty recently. Hassan Whiteside as well, double-double. And then Carmelo Anthony playing some of his best basketball, had his best game the other night. And so this team seems to be getting all of the right things happening to them at the right time, whereas the Grizzlies have very different fortunes. Not even to mention the fact that the Pelicans are 3.5 back from the Grizzlies, and they're up and coming as well. We talked about it earlier. Zion Williamson has been a huge added bonus to this roster, where Ingram is still leading them. If Lonzo can add a little more to them in terms of points, and Drew Holiday being more consistent on the offensive end, they could be a very, very solid team and easily make that push into the 8th seed. And now, the Kings and the Spurs are both only behind by 3.5 games, which I think is crazy. I thought the Sacramento Kings were down and out, but they've been on a 3-game winning streak as of late. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games and been playing with a lot of confidence, playing really well. Most recently, they beat the Warriors, which isn't that impressive, obviously, since the Warriors are the worst team in the league. at 12-46, which is honestly just sad to see. But the Kings are playing really well. They can make that push for the 8th seed. And the Spurs as well. They haven't been playing great as of late. They're 3-7 in their last 10 on a 2-game losing streak, but they're right there. They're hanging around. And with the Grizzlies on this losing streak without Jaren Jackson Jr., it looks like they maybe can lose out and fall out of this race. Looking at the rest of the Western Conference, the Mavericks are far away in 7th place. They're 7.5 up on the Grizzlies, so there is some breathing room there. But everyone that I just mentioned is rushing to the door. The Grizzlies just tripped heading to the door. It's like an elevator about to close. Who is that 8th seed? Who's that last person that wants to get into that elevator that takes them up to the playoffs? Because right now, the Los Angeles Lakers are going to be the 1 seed. They've only lost 12 games this year. They are 5 games up on the Denver Nuggets. Now, 2 through 7 are separated by 4.5 games. So that'll move around a lot. But that 8th seed, that is where teams can get their bread and butter. That is where they can try and push in. With the Utah Jazz losing a bunch of games too, though, on that 4-game losing streak, the only team on a big losing streak in that 1 through 7 in the Western Conference, maybe they can drop out too. But I don't see a lot of teams really pushing past that 1 through 7 wall just because of how separated that those teams are. But if they continue losing games, then teams like the Pelicans, the Blazers, they could both get in. I don't know necessarily that the Kings are going to make it in just because of how inconsistent they have been this season so far. And with their injuries and their injury-prone players, I feel like it will be tough for them to try and make that push, especially since they just had an injury scare with De'Aaron Fox the other game as well. So for me, that 1 through 7 will be solidified, but it will definitely be mixed up as well. Lakers, Nuggets, Clippers, Rockets, Thunder, Jazz, Mavericks. That's how 1 through 7 looks right now. I think with the way that things are trending right now, the Jazz will fall down to that 7th seed. The Rockets are on the craziest win streak right now, so I think maybe they can eclipse the Clippers, who have been playing up and down basketball all season long, get into that third place, maybe even 2nd place if the Nuggets somehow slip up as well. But this is an area where a lot of teams can shuffle. I think the Thunder could probably fall off a little bit too. They're sitting in 5th place right now, and now that the Jazz have been on a losing streak. So a lot of pieces are in play. Teams that are definitely out are the Timberwolves and the Warriors. But even the Phoenix Suns are honestly right there too. They're not too far behind. The Grizzlies are up on them by 4.5 games. So the Suns are right there too. And honestly, that last tier of the Western Conference, it's up for grabs. And with the Grizzlies, without Jaren Jackson Jr., I think that they can drop a lot of games. And it's going to be tough for them to hold on to that 8th seed. I think that they're going to, with the 4-game losing streak, it's just going to continue. And it's going to be tough for them to, try and hold on, especially in a season where most of their team is super young anyway. So this is a time where they need to build on what they want to accomplish in a few years. This isn't really necessarily the season they want to be trying to make a deep run in the playoffs. It would be nice, obviously, to make the playoffs, but I don't think it would raise a bunch of eyebrows for them. Wouldn't be a huge deal for them if they didn't make it this year, because they'd be back even better, even stronger, even more experienced next year. Something very similar is happening in the East as well. The Heat and the Pacers keep falling, so stay with us. We'll talk about that next.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just broke down the Western Conference, talked about a couple of teams that are slipping as of late. The Utah Jazz have not been playing up to their standards as of late. They're on a 4-game losing streak. They're 4-6 in their last 10 games. And they've fallen all the way to 6th place. Just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, they were in 2nd place playing some of the best basketball in the NBA. Second hottest team at the time behind the Raptors, who were on a crazy win streak of their own. But now, they're on a 4-game losing streak, falling down in the table. The Memphis Grizzlies as well, they're on a 4-game losing streak, 4-6 in the last 10, holding on to that 8th seed with teams like the Blazers, the Pelicans, the Kings, the Spurs, even the Suns, all looking to make that push to get them out of that playoff spot and get them in. So it's definitely a toss-up right now, definitely is plausible. Can't rule that out at all, definitely can happen. I think something similar can kind of happen in the East, not necessarily about teams getting in, but can fluctuate within this Eastern Conference because a lot of teams are not separated by a lot. A team we're going to look at right now is the Heat. They haven't been themselves lately. I don't know what's wrong with them. They're on a 2-game losing streak in their own right. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games. I have no idea what's going on with the Miami Heat. No idea. During that time, they've lost to the Clippers. Understandable. They can be a really good team when they want to be. Sacramento Kings, who, like we talked about, have been kind of on a tear lately, have been playing a lot better and more confident lately, but that's still the Sacramento Kings. I think that's a team they should still be able to beat. The Blazers, who are kind of hit and miss, I think during this time, Damian Lillard was on his hot streak and just playing out of his mind. The Utah Jazz, who are slipping in their own right, so that's not a good look for them to lose to them. The Atlanta Hawks, who are currently the worst team in the Eastern Conference at 17-43. So why are you losing to them? And then the last 2 games that you lost to the Cavaliers, who are second worst in the Eastern Conference, and the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are second worst in the Western Conference. So not only are the Miami Heat losing games, they're losing games to very poor opponents. So I have no idea what's going wrong with them, what happened to them. And neither does Dragic. He said, quote, "It's just frustrating. It feels like we're not the same team we were in the first half of the season," end quote, which is very, very accurate. You're not the same team you were in the first half of the season. That put you up top the Eastern Conference from the beginning. They were 2 or 3 for months, and now they're in 4th place, luckily, because the Sixers and the Pacers had just been abysmal as well. They've been completely blowing games lately. Like, they would go up big, they'd be playing really well, and then just blow it. For example, they had a 22-point lead against the Cavs a couple games ago, and they blew that. That's really poor. And their most recent game, they lost to the Timberwolves, who are garbage. If they had lost this game, the Timberwolves had lost this game, they would have lost their 19th of their last 20 games. So that means they've lost 18 of their last 20 since they beat the Heat. But either way, the Heat in this game were up by 12 with less than 4 to play, less than 4 minutes in the game. And then the Timberwolves went on a 20-5 run. And the game-tying attempt by Jimmy Butler after they had lost the lead, game-tying attempt by Jimmy Butler with the clock winding down, he was blocked by D'Angelo Russell. He does not play defense. He's not a great defender. I mean, sometimes when he, puts himself out there and actually tries to play well on defense, he does a pretty decent job. But I just thought it was so funny that D'Lo is the guy that ends up blocking on your game-tying attempt, because that guy got somewhat pushed out of the Warriors because of the fact that he wasn't willing to play defense in a system where they really needed him to play defense. And so Minnesota Timberwolves get a much-needed win for them, but the Heat have to sit around and look at themselves like, what is happening? Why are we blowing these games to such poor opponents? Eric Spoelstra, the coach of the Miami Heat, is staying a little more optimistic than I am, at least. He said, quote, "I just think this is our period of the season where there's some adversity. It's a good thing when the thing we need to work on is what to do when we have double-digit leads. That shows we're capable of getting to that point. We just have to close out and finish, end quote. And I think that's a very good point. I didn't really think of it in that light just because I look at it at the fact that you're blowing games. But if that is your biggest issue right now, you know you can go up big on teams. You just have to execute properly to completely bury them. And I think they easily can. They can easily get back to closing out games, being that team that is very formidable and very clutch when they need to be. They're a top 4 team in the East. You know, they've been in this situation before. And to be able to close out games is huge, especially in the playoffs. So at this point in the season, like I've been saying all season long, they need to push to get some good momentum going for these playoffs. Like I said before, they're in 4th place, just a half game better than the Sixers, which is sad because the Philadelphia 76ers are in a position where they could leapfrog the Heat, get into the top 4, get into a position where they could be they can be having home court advantage in their first matchup, but instead, they have injuries in Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid that makes it look like they're never going to pass the Miami Heat without them. There's no way. And this Eastern Conference is pretty broken up. You got in one tier at number 1, the unbeatable Bucks in first place. They're 8 games up on the Raptors. And then there's this section of 2 teams with the Toronto Raptors, Boston Celtics. They're separated by 1 point, fighting to get second place. But like I said, Toronto Raptors are 8 points behind the Bucks. The Celtics are 9 games behind the Bucks. And then there's a pack with the Heat, the Sixers, and the Pacers. They're all within 2 games of each other. But they're also 5 games behind the Celtics. Miami Heat are 5 games behind the Celtics in 4th place. Sixers are a half game back from the Heat, and the Pacers are another game and a half behind the Sixers. So that's their own little section of the Eastern Conference. And then at the very, very bottom of the Eastern Conference playoff picture, you have the Nets and the Magic, both separated by 0.5 or half of a game, whereas they're 7.5 away from the Pacers. And so this is a really weird Eastern Conference, in my opinion. It's broken up into sections. It's not super competitive right now because of just how I don't even know the right word. They're just very separated right now in terms of 1 through 8. I mean, Orlando Magic are 24 games back from the Milwaukee Bucks, and they are still in a playoff picture. They're 26-32. The Nets are 26-31, both under 500 and still 7-8 in that playoff picture, which is absolutely insane. The Indiana Pacers have been pretty poor lately. They've been 3-7 in their last 10. They did just win a game, though, against the Charlotte Hornets. And speaking of the Hornets, we're going to talk Malik Monk for a second. The NBA suspended Charlotte's Malik Monk for violating terms of anti-drug program. The funny thing is that it's an open-ended suspension, so they can just choose when it ends. It will continue until he is determined to be in full compliance with the NBA/NBPA anti-drug program. So that's a huge blow for the Charlotte Hornets, who I don't think they can really make a push for the playoffs at this point, just because they've been very inconsistent, haven't had that production they were hoping for this season from a lot of their players. So they're not going to go anywhere. But going back to the Pacers, they had a 6-game losing streak pretty recently, their worst of the season, where they lost to the New York Knicks, who are still one of the worst teams in the East, in case you forgot about them. They lost to the Mavericks. That's fine. The Raptors twice. The Pelicans, which is tough. That's all a tough schedule. And then they lost to the Brooklyn Nets, who, like I just mentioned, are not that good. So there are some games in there where they could have won some games pretty easily, in my opinion. Recently, most recently, they've won 3 of their last 4 games, so they could be getting back on track, but who knows with them. With their inconsistency over the last couple of weeks, it just brings into question whether or not they can sustain their momentum and keep pushing up. I mean, with the 76ers playing as poorly as they are, and the Heat even playing poorly, they can leapfrog both of them, and they can get into 4th place, looking to get back into the top brackets, get a home court advantage for their first postseason matchup as well. So a lot to fight for in this Eastern Conference between these teams, especially in that middle group with the Heat, the 76ers, and Pacers. It's going to be very interesting to see how that shakes out. If the Pacers get back on track, they can fight with Miami Heat for that fourth place spot. But right now it's looking like Bucks are for sure going to be number one. Toronto Raptors and Celtics, they'll switch back and forth on who's going to be second and third. And then the Heat and the Pacers probably will fight for that fourth spot, that last home court advantage spot for the first round of playoffs. But the 76ers, in my opinion, probably going to fall off. 7 and 8 don't really matter in Eastern Conference. I don't think they'll do anything in the playoffs at all. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. Coming up next, we finish up the show with some predictions on the top games over the next few days heading into the weekend. So don't go anywhere.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about the Eastern Conference and how it's weirdly set up right now. It's got Milwaukee Bucks at number one, all alone. 8 games back are the Toronto Raptors. 9 games back to the Boston Celtics. Those two teams are separated by 1 point, kind of fighting for second and third right now. Then another 5 games back from the Celtics is the Miami Heat. And the Heat, the 76ers, and Pacers, they're all separated by just 2 games. So they're in a little pack of their own, fighting for that fourth place spot, that last home court advantage spot for the first round of playoffs. And then all the way at the bottom are the Brooklyn Nets and Orlando Magic, both losing records in 7 and 8. They're 7.5 games back from the Pacers, largely out of that top 6 section, with the Washington Wizards 4.5 back from the Orlando Magic. So it's looking like that's pretty much how it's going to shake out, how it's going to end up. So very interesting looking Eastern Conference. A lot of things can change in terms of 4 through 6, with the 76ers having a lot of injury issues. And the Pacers looking like they're turning a page. But will the Miami Heat hold on to that fourth place spot is yet to be seen. And now looking forward, we're going to talk about some predictions about some big games coming up in the next few days. The first one we're going to talk about is the Nuggets and the Clippers happening on Friday. And I think this would be a really good matchup between these two teams. The Nuggets won the last one, 114-104, January 12th. They also did beat the Clippers in preseason all that time ago. And it's just preseason, so you don't really make too much of that. But either way, a win's a win. And so the Nuggets have bragging rights as of right now. The Nuggets are in second place, another reason for bragging rights. And the Clippers are in third place. They're 1 game behind the Nuggets right now. So this is a huge, huge game for them to try and cut that deficit, try and get back into second place, where both LA teams would hold 1 and 2, which I think is how it really should shake out, how it should look at the end of the day. Both teams are on 2-game win streaks. And apparently there are no injuries right now for the Los Angeles Clippers, which is absolutely crazy if you've been following their season at all. They've been having a lot of injury issues with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Patrick Beverley, so on and so forth. But on the injury report list on ESPN that I looked at, there's no injuries for this game, which I think is crazy. So that being said, it could change how this game could have been perceived beforehand. the Clippers also are playing at home. They're 23-6 at home, and the Nuggets are pretty respectable at 17-11 away. But because of all the people coming back from injury, because of how good they are at home, I got to go with the Los Angeles Clippers. I mean, they have so much talent when they're all playing together. I think this is where they make their turn. This is where they make their move to get up to the second place, maybe even get first place in the Western Conference. We talked about it last podcast, how they haven't had a lot of consistency, haven't had a lot of chemistry build. They haven't had a lot of time together. So now that everyone's back from being injured, I think this is the time where they start building that momentum, and beating a team like the Denver Nuggets, who are ahead of you in the standings just by a game, is a huge, huge moment for them to try and change some momentum for themselves and start taking into the playoffs. And I think this is going to be a moment where they beat the Nuggets. And yeah, that's what I think. They're going to win this game. Moving on, another game on Friday night. Got the Heat versus the Mavericks. I think this is going to be a really good game. The Heat are slipping as of late. The Mavericks are 36-23 on the season. The Heat are 36-22 on the season. So very close from a record standpoint. The Mavericks just have one more loss than the Heat do. So if the Mavericks were in the Eastern Conference, they'd be neck and neck right now. For the Heat, there's going to be no Tyler Hero or Myers Leonard. So that's a huge blow for them. Not going to be great. Miami at home, though, are 23-4. So they love their home court. Dallas are 20-9 on the road, though, which is pretty good. They're better on the road than they are at home, which I think is crazy. I mean, shouldn't you be able to play better in front of your home fans? That's what I would think, at least. But either way, this means that it's going to be a very close game, in my opinion, just because of the momentums that's been going into play, the records for the teams generally at home and the road. But with all this given information, I'm going to go with the Dallas Mavericks just because the Heat are struggling right now to find that offense, find their rhythm, find their way to close out games. And when you have a player like Luka Doncic in the mix, I think he can bring a lot of X factor to this game and maybe take it over as well. With Kristaps Porzingis playing some of his better basketball as well, I think they'll have a lot of momentum together, and the Heat are going to struggle to try and stop either of those players. And with their broken confidence right now, I think it's going to be a perfect moment for the Mavericks to steal a game and move up this Western Conference standings. And I think it's going to be Mavericks that come out on top. On Saturday, the Houston Rockets play the Boston Celtics. And this is the best game of the weekend. If you choose to watch any NBA games at all, watch this one. This one's going to be a fantastic matchup. It's going to be crazy, an absolute bloodbath. You see one unstoppable force in Russell Westbrook meet Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. And it's going to be so much fun to watch. I mean, I gave you all the stats on Westbrook earlier. He's been playing crazy good in these small ball lineups. And he's just been thriving with them. And they've been, as a team, playing extremely well. And then you have the Boston Celtics, who have a budding superstar in Jason Tatum. In the month of February, he's averaging 30.3 points per game, 7.2 rebounds per game, on 50% shooting from the field, and 49.5% shooting from three-point land. So the man has been on fire. Boston is going to be at home in this game, where they're 23-5 and are 8-2 in their last 10 games. The Rockets are 17-12 away, but they are on a 5-game win streak, and they're 8-2 in their last 10 as well. So these two teams are meeting at very mutual points where they're just both on fire, playing very well. And for me, a lot of teams have struggled with Houston because of their small ball lineups and them wanting to play their centers, like the Jazz, who has struggled just a few games ago. But I feel like Boston can play small ball. They can play small, and they match up really well. They won't have Kemba Walker in this game, which definitely hurts. But to combat that, the Rockets don't have Eric Gordon, which hurts them, not in the same way, obviously, but does hurt. But either way, I think that the Celtics still match up really well. You got Marcus Smart, who will probably start instead. Jaylen Brown Jason Tatum, like I said, has been going off. Gordon Hayward, they can play that small ball look, and I think it'll work out really well for them. I think that Boston is going to win this game rather convincingly, honestly. I think they'll win the game by more than 10. But either way, it's going to be a very close contest. It's going to be very fun to watch. I don't know who's going to check Russell Westbrook, though. I'm hoping it'll be Jaylen Brown and probably Marcus Smart who's going to switch on them. But James Harden's going to get looks from Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward, and maybe they can bottle him up just a little bit. But I don't see anyone being able to stop Jason Tatum from the Houston Rockets. So he'll have another great game. He'll lead the team. And I think that it's going to be a good day for Boston fans. And then the last matchup we're going to talk about, happening on Sunday, and it's the Lakers versus the Pelicans. Can I get a rematch between these two teams? We talked about it earlier in the podcast. They obviously played just a few days ago, yesterday in fact, and so obviously the Lakers won this round. LeBron with a 40-point game, his best game of the season, really got up for this one. The Lakers, obviously the best team in the West. They're on a 6-game winning streak, 8-2 in their last 10. And they're probably going to improve that just a bit before they even play the Pelicans because they play the Warriors first. Even if they don't have LeBron or Anthony Davis, they should beat the Warriors, unfortunately, which is bad for me. But anyway, they're also 23-5 on the road. So the Lakers are actually better on the road than they are at home, which is insane to me. A team that's already that good is even better on the road. So going to the playoffs, whoever they play, should be very scared about that fact. The Pelicans, on the other hand, are 11-17 at home. They're actually better on the road as well. So it's unfortunate for them. It looks like all the stats are playing to the fact that the Lakers will win this game. LeBron and AD are both day-to-day and probably won't play against the Warriors, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be playing in this game against the Pelicans. I mean, it doesn't seem like any serious injuries. So going Lakers would probably be the smart choice. But I'm going with the Pelicans just because I think that they're going to want a little revenge. I mean, they're not going to lose. They're not going to get swept in this season series against the Los Angeles Lakers. There's no way, right? I mean, Brandon Ingram is going to have a little more pride than that. He's got to have a little saltiness about his team trading him. Lonzo, I think, will step it up, especially after getting embarrassed by Caruso, getting blocked at the rim the way he did. Zion Williamson will want to impose himself a little bit more on the game, even though he had a great game for his first game against the King and the Lakers. He had 29 points, but I still think he's going to want to outdo LeBron in this one and make a bigger name for himself. And so I think I'm going to go with the Pelicans, even though they probably won't win this game. I'm just going to stick with them because they've been my team in these predictions. They never steer me wrong. Plus, they're going to make a push for the playoff spot. So that's going to do it for this podcast. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review because that really helps us out. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm mostly on Twitter, tweeting scores of the games, some captions here and there about each game, every big game that's going on. So some more content happening on there for days where we don't put out podcasts. So go and follow us on there. I would greatly appreciate that. I'm Isiah Quiroz. Thank you guys. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.